Like this, in butternut, you're looking at probably 14, 16 coats of tung oil built up to get it shine. But in coco bolo, you'll have that shine in 3 coats, just because of the density and the oil content in the wood. It's not absorbing the finish like a sponge.
Is it 1 coat of linseed?
Yes. Yeah, just 1 coat of linseed oil, and that is diluted 50% with mineral spirits. Once I take it off the lathe, these little tins are great. These are little cat food tins. My cat gets soft food ever so often, so they're good to save. They're reusable. I use them for paints, finishes, everything. Even when you're finishing, it's a good idea to wear safety glasses, because sometimes it can splash up in your eyes, and it is, in liquid form, it is poisonous. I would then take my mineral spirits. I don't really measure it 50-50. I usually do about a capful, or if I don't feel like doing a capful, I'll just do it like a little glug of finish. As long as it's diluted enough to allow it to penetrate into the wood, I'm happy. My first few coats, I use paint brushes, because even though I sanded this to 240, if I take my lint-free rag or my paper towel and I go across that end grain, or I go into a bark or a crevice or a crack or a void, or if I've done stippling or wood burning, there's highs and lows and sharp edges that are going to catch that. So I always apply the finish with a paintbrush. These are my go-to. You get these at Canadian Tire. The big ones are $1.50. These are 97 cents. Once I use them, I clean them with paint thinner. If you forget to clean them, the next day they're garbage, but I mean, if they last a week, they've paid for themselves. So my first few coats, I just dip in my diluted tung oil, either 2/3 tung oil to 1/3 mineral spirits, or if you really want to measure it, you can do 50-50. I always start at the high point, and I work my way around the circumference of the bowl. Whenever you're finishing, you have to think about gravity. Gravity will be your enemy. Everything's going to pool to the bottom. Same thing with flat work and furniture. With gravity, you always work from the top down, and then you work from the down up, just in case there were any drips and runs that went down the side of your cabinet. In this case, I always start at the high point. Any drips or runs drip into the center, and then my final goes with the grain. My first 5 coats, first 4, depending on the wood of course, probably first 3 to 5 coats will absorb like a sponge. So at any given time, my finishing table probably has this amount of items on it in different stages. I always start with the most raw state. So with these, I would paint on the finish. I would leave that. By the time we come back, majority of that will be absorbed into the wood. Any excess that has pooled or dripped into the bowl, I would wipe off with mineral spirits. Or you can also use paint thinner, you can use turpentine, you can use the methyl hydrate or denatured alcohol, any sort of solvent thinner used in paints, lacquers, or oil finishes.
What do you do with the bark? You paint it?
Yes, if it is a bark on the edge, or in this case, this one I just finished and I just put a coat of linseed oil, I would paint the whole piece. Start at the top, go down to the center. This one's end grain, so I don't have to go with the grain. And then I work my way back up to the rim, Anything with a sharp, irregular edge that would fray, catch on my paper, I always paint on. So this, I would paint all the sides, I would paint the inside, and leave that. That would be one of the first ones I did. Come back and make sure it's not pooling in the bottom. If anything's pooling in the bottom, I wipe it off with a paper towel. When I first started finishing, I used to always use these Bounty paper towels. I would cut them into sheets, fold them in half, fold the sides in, and you create a little pad. Because when you rip paper towel, each edge is ripped, and you'll have fluff and paper and lint on the edges of that paper towel. If you fold it in that fashion, you have a perfectly lint-free pad here to apply your finish. It's great. I still use it at times, but now I have found these, which are gun cleaning pads. These are interwoven cotton, so they're a little stronger than paper towel. They will still fray and leave cotton strings or hair-like fibers in your finish if you're not paying attention. These you can get at sale. I used to be able to get them at Gagnon Sports. I'll pass that around. Coats, I always paint on with the brush. First 5 coats, I would apply the finish. Next time before so this one has about 2 coats. It's starting to pool. This one is all absorbing in because it's the first coat of tongue oil. This one is only about 3 coats. So after about 2 coats, I will start sanding in between each coat of finish. I will sand with a 500. Beginning with my first 1 to 5 coats, I use a 500. I'm not going rough because I don't want to remove the finish. I just do a light scuff with the grain. Again, you want to go with the grain because any scratches or buildup of residue or wood or pitch on here will scratch the surface. And if you go with the grain, those scratches are hidden in the grain. I go with the grain, and then my final pass is around the circumference of the rim of the bowl. I start with the end grain, around and out the end grain. Again, because if there are scratches, they're hidden in the end grain. Once I've done that, rough sanded it in between each coat, I take my
Where'd you get those high-end cups you're using?
Oh, they're cat food containers for soft food, wet cat food. Since I sanded this in between coats with a 500, I just dipped it in the wrong one. I dipped it in tongue oil. I would dip it in my pure mineral spirits. I go with the grain around up to the rim, and then up to the top of the rim. This is not going to scratch it nearly as much as, say, a sandpaper would. So this, you don't have to go with the grain around and out the end grain, but with sandpaper it's beneficial because that one time you're on that final coat, you'll have a big dirty scratch right across the grain and it'll drive you insane. Once I have sanded between coats with a 500, I take, in the beginning, when it's absorbing like a sponge, more is better. Once you get up to about 4 or 5 coats, less of a coat is better because it's not going to absorb as much into the wood. Therefore, it would start dripping and pooling at the bottom. I would start at the top of my bowl, working around the circumference to the center of my bowl. My final pass, I just didn't have enough on there. I would go with the grain And when I'm doing these laps, either across the grain or around the bowl, each lap, each pass overlaps the other one, just in case there was excessive finish that pooled out into the sides. You now pick that up because you overlapped each pass halfway into the other pass, removing the material around the piece evenly, which also reduces dripping, pooling. And then my final pass is around the circumference of the curve, out the end grain, and do the top rim. That's if I'm doing a uniform bowl. If I'm doing a uniform bowl that, say, has bark on it, if it's the final few coats, it's absorbed enough, I've sanded over it with 800, I would just dip this in the finish, start at the top of the foot, work my way down to the rim of the bowl. When I hit the irregular bark, I either dab it, because I don't want these fibers to catch the high points and then rip off and I have hair-like cotton strings going through my finish. Or I would take a paintbrush, I would paint the irregular pieces, and then I would take my shotgun patch and I would continue around the circumference of the outside of the bowl, working from the foot to the rim of the bowl. Once I get to the very bottom of the bowl, I work my way right back up to the top of this bowl, and every pass overlaps the one I had just done previous. This ensures that any finish that went to the bottom had pooled. It has now worked its way back up to the top, to the highest point of gravity, and it is less likely to drip, pool, and run. And then you have this nasty teardrop down the side of your bowl. 9 times out of 10, general public won't see it, but you'll see it like a sore thumb, and it will drive you nuts. Or it drives me nuts.
It's okay. You do the inside, let it dry, then you do the outside, or do you do it all at once?
When I'm doing the first few coats, it's absorbing like a sponge. I would coat the bottom, the top, I would leave that. I would only do the top and the bottom for one coat. Every coat after that, I only either do the top or the bottom. Because the very first coat, everything's going to absorb like a sponge. So even if I coat this side first, do this side, by the time I set it, and even this sitting on the bottom here, it's still going to absorb. And anything that does pool here will be sanded off with the 500 on my next pass. So it's not crucial. But any time after that, I find I would do either the inside or the outside. I would get the inside to enough coats that I'm happy with, and then I would do the outside or the bottom to match. And then actually, I would do the inside till I'm about happy with it. It might be another 3 coats on top of that. I would then flip it. It's still totally saturated. Now I'm just building up to the sheen I want. I would then flip it to the back side. I would do the back side, and I would get that to the absolute finish that I want, the high gloss finish or the sheen. And then I would flip it, and I would only do the inside, the final 3 coats. That's if they're uniform bowls. If they're a flared rim bowl, I always do the inside of the bowl first. I start at the top of the rim. I go around the bowl, working my way to the center of this bowl. My final passes are with the grain, overlapping. And my final pass is around the circumference top. The inside's done. When I do the flared rim, or a big rim bowl, I always take that finish and I stick it right in the center, because I don't want any